Hello, and welcome to the 2022 Forbes Queens of Culture Legends of Business in partnership with Moet Hennessy. As we prepare for an evening of enlightening conversation, we would like to welcome Roland Guevara, Director of Cultural Diversity, Partnerships and Engagement, Moet Hennessy North America, to the stage.
I guess reading from my phone isn't really an option today, so it's fine. This light is bright. It's truly an honor to be here this evening. One, I want to say this room looks absolutely amazing. You are all absolutely incredible. Please give yourselves a round of applause. I hope you all have a drink in your hand as well. Like, I do work for Moet Hennessy. I want to make sure you all have a cocktail in your hand. You know, several months ago, I reached out to Sadé Muhammad with Forbes, and the goal was, yes, big shout out to Sadé. You know, I'll take a step back. I'm with Moet Hennessy, of course, driving out diversity and inclusion for the business, and we really have a strong commitment to diversity. It's truly incremental and really important to the work that we're doing, and it's imperative to our work. So I reached out to Sadé, and I said, Sadé, you know, I really want to create a partnership with Forbes magazine to identify trailblazing women executives of color who are truly transforming their businesses, their leaders, and they're at a space in this world where they're taking over businesses. And so we thought about this for a while. We had a ton of conversations, and we're here. We've created amazing partnerships with Forbes and Moet Hennessy to identify, again, today, as you see it, Queens of Culture. So to each one of you, as a Queens of Culture, we welcome you. Please give yourselves a round of applause. We wanted to create a moment that was filled with, a monumental moment rather, that was filled with executives of color, CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, SVPs, VPs, individuals who really, quote unquote, didn't play by the rules and said, you know what, I'm gonna drive and make a difference. And as you did this and as you've grown, what you have done significantly is bring other women with you. And each one of you are doing that. What you've done is you've earned a seat at the table. You've created your own seats at the table. You've created your own table. And you've brought others with you. And when you brought others with you, you've made the table stronger. You've made your businesses stronger, more profitable. And quite frankly, there's nothing businesses can do without listening to each one of you. So I thank you, and I commend you, and I congratulate you for this incredible work that you're leading every day. Please give yourselves a real round of applause because the work you're doing is awesome. And to the guests of the honorees, you're all leaders as well. Each one of you were handpicked by the honorees who are here today. That's because you've made a significant difference in their lives, both professionally and personally. Many times, our businesses are at a space where we need to hear from our leaders, and each one of you are. So I commend you to the guests that are here today and everyone who came out to support the honorees. Give yourselves a round of applause, too. Let's go. So as we somewhat close out, as I close out here, I just want to say a couple things. Get to know each other this evening. I encourage you all to please get to know at least 2 other women who you haven't met before, or 5. Each one of you are making your businesses stronger. Businesses are great. Let's call it what it is. We work for a great company, and each of the women who are honored here today are making our business that much better. But we congratulate you today. We celebrate you. We recognize you for your hard work, for your dedication, for your sacrifices, for the obstacles you had to overcome that no one knows but you. We congratulate, we commend you, we recognize you, and we thank you. Thank you for coming out here with us today. And to that, I want to say, please raise a glass. Cheers to each one of you.
Up next, we have Culture Talks, a conversation amongst queens. Please welcome to the stage Huma Abedin, Chief of Staff to Hillary Clinton, author of Both and A Life in Many Worlds. Valeisha Butterfield Jones, co-president, the Recording Academy. Sunny Hostin, Emmy Award-winning co-host of ABC's The View and New York Times best-selling author. Yvette Noel-Schure, Chief Communications Officer and co-founder, Schure Media Group. And moderator, Rocky Harris, Senior Multi-Platform Reporter, Forbes The Culture, Forbes.
All right, y'all. This is the creme de la creme that is sitting on stage right now. Please give these ladies another round of applause. Now, you all have been dubbed culture queens for the impact that you've made in the world and your communities. What does it feel like to be crowned that title? Huma, I'll start with you.
Well, first of all, I'm thrilled to be in community with all of you. And for me, I didn't process the Queen's word really until I got here. But for me, it feels more like being in a sisterhood. And so I'm honored and humbled to be with all these women who I really admire and look forward to meeting all of you.
Yes. First, good evening. I am so honored to also be in community and conversation with just this beautiful room of queens. And when I think of the title queen, I just recognize that it's not an appointment, but an assignment, right? Heavy wears the head. And so when I think of, the weight that we carry as women, as Black women, it's a responsibility. And I always say, don't waste the seat. And so just honored to be here and to do this work.
Beautiful, absolutely.
I guess I think about it in how you define culture. And I generally define culture in a sense as how we define a group of people by our, I guess, rhythms, by our systems, right? By our art, by our methods, by our groupings, and I think that's a huge responsibility. If I'm a queen of it, that means I'm a shepherd of it. And
Come on.
And almost more importantly, a protector of it.
Yes.
And so it is a humbling role, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You deserve it, girl.
Hi, everybody. I'm so honored to be here. I think I told you before, I said yes because of these ladies. For me, I think that's a really, really heavy, heavy, heavy load.
Yeah.
Responsibility is a big, big thing. But for me, it's about legacy. Who came before me in my family, the women, they've never been called those names. And what did they start doing that they never got to finish? I'm here. I got to finish it.
Yeah, absolutely. Come on. Now, speaking of the women that came before you, who were the women who inspired you on your come up? Because I know, of course, when you're on that exhale to your success, it's important to see people who are looking like you, who are doing the same things that you're doing. Valeisha?
Well, I'll start by saying I remember growing up in a little town in North Carolina. The town is called Wilson. In the eastern part of the state, I heard no screams because you probably never heard of it. And just a tiny country town dot on the map. And I remember having dreams, vivid, in-color dreams of working in the entertainment industry from as early as 8 years old. And once I got ready to go to college, and again, this was a dream that no one believed was possible, there were women like Deborah Lee, Sylvia Rohn, Kathy Hughes, Shanti Das, Lisa Ellis, and the list goes on, that were just shining examples for me that it was possible. And I remember eventually moving to New York City, meeting and getting to know all of those women who I now call friends, and just receiving such a warm embrace. And so when I think of the term and the word queen, and again, the responsibility of that, I feel good that the women that I looked up to truly lived it and demonstrated it in their values, but also in how they lifted as they climbed.
Absolutely. Sunny?
My story's a little different because I wanted to be a storyteller. I wanted to combine the law with storytelling, talking about our system. and there wasn't anyone that looked like me doing it. And sadly, I remain the only Black legal correspondent on network television today, right? And so my mission is to not be the only anymore, because I think once you're in the room where it happens, you must leave the door open and reach behind you, pull some other people in, because we know alone we can survive, but together is really where we thrive, which is why I feel so good to be in this room. And so I didn't have that role model to model myself off of, but I hope I've become more of a possibility model for others. But I didn't have that.
Wow. There was no one. There was no one on my little island doing what I'm doing now. I'm from Grenada, and I didn't even know what a publicist was. There might have been people doing it, and there was no name for it, right? But I remember years later going home and speaking to a room of young girls about the age I was when I left Grenada at 14. And they looked at me like, "Miss, what you talking about? What you talking about? And why they need somebody to talk for them? Why are you a spokesperson? They can't talk for themselves?" You know, and 2019, I went back to that same school, obviously a different set of 14-year-olds, and at least 6 of them wanted to be a publicist. And I just think it's about, you know, I say it everywhere I go. It's about taking a ladder and throwing it down. Exactly. So the next person can climb, and it thrills me that those little Grenadian girls can climb. Absolutely. Because they know what's possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. Going back to you, Sunny, I know during an interview with Jamil Hill, you had talked about choosing the role on The View versus a DA role because you wanted to have an impact that was on a systemic level, but you weren't sure if you would have the same impact from that DA or judge position. For women who were looking to make a career pivot, what advice would you give them? And what did you consider during that time too, you know, versus DA versus going to The View?
Oh, sure. I was asked to head one of the city's DA's offices, actually. And I almost left. I was going to do that instead of taking a position at The View. And I spoke to Anderson Cooper's executive producer. And I said, "Charlie, I think I'm going to do this other thing instead of The View." And he was like, "You are crazy." And I said, "I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it to affect change. And I think I can do that there." And he said, "You'll be speaking to 3 million people every single day. Trust me, that's where you'll affect change." And he was right, and I was wrong. And so I think that when you can combine a passion with a purpose, and you have reach, and you can platform yourself, that's really important, especially for women in our community. And so I think when you're looking for that next move, you shouldn't just be sent. It's easier said than done. You shouldn't be centered, because I was married to an orthopedic surgeon, so I didn't need the money. I always preface it with that, right? It's easy for me to say that, but when you can combine passion and purpose, the money tends to come because you love what you do and you're good at it. So that's what I would say. Find that thing that lights you up, because I just think it's really important to live a life of purpose. And that's what you see me doing now, you know? I mean, I'll probably get fired eventually because I say a lot of stuff.
I don't think so. You're a favorite.
Thank you. But but that's always my advice to folks.
Huma.
Well, for me, you know, I think back to my childhood and my experience, and you know, I grew up in the Middle East, and I grew up in a culture and a place where you didn't see a lot of women out in the workspace or doing very much. And so when I wrote my book, I share the story of my grandmother, who lived in India, and in a time when girls were not sent to school. And when she was 8 years old, she went to her parents and said, I demand to be educated in university, a school. And she went to school, left home every day, and back then it was considered shameful for a girl to be seen leaving her home. And she was educated, went to college, and then produced my mother, who became a Fulbright scholar, which then led to me. When I was growing up in Saudi Arabia, you also didn't see a lot of girls wandering around in the streets. And I remember we had a little pet cat who we named Tiger, and she was a female cat. And I remember thinking, every time Tiger would leave and wander in the streets, like how lucky she was that she had the freedom to wander the streets. And to the point that all these ladies have been making about seeing something to believe it's possible, for me that didn't happen until I was watching TV one day and saw Christiane Amanpour talk about, to the point, everything that all of you said really resonates with me. This notion of seeing something to believe it's possible. And I saw her and I believed anything was possible. So when I walked into the White House to then work for Hillary Clinton, who 53 years ago, when she was giving her commencement speech at Wellesley University, said politics is the art of making the impossible possible. And so much of that journey, every single day, I said to myself, the day I woke up and did not want to go to work is the day I would give notice. And that's what it is to find purpose in your life, to do something that you love, to be at a table, and to always believe that there's space for more people, for more women. And Yvette, when you said this notion of throwing down the ladder, it's something I say all the time, which is the way I was raised in politics and in my profession. Our responsibility is the opposite. When you're climbing up the steps of that ladder, you're responsible to reach below and reach for hands below you and not step on the fingers of those below, because then there is no progress for everybody. So that's been like for me.
What issues for women in leadership roles did you see back when you started versus today? I know, because as we know, women go through a lot, okay, often, all the time, still today. But what were some of the issues that you saw back then that you still kind of see now?
Pay. The pay disparity. Oh, yes, my goodness. Yes. That's got to change. I'm going to tell you this really, really quick story. I wasn't supposed to see it, and I saw it. I was in my colleague's office, male friend, good friend, after all these years. And he was on this water kick, so he was get up to use the bathroom all the time. And he ran out the bathroom, and then there was his pay stub, just in front of me. So. So I looked at it, and I grew up in my grandfather's shop without a calculator, without a cash register, learning to count 85 numbers in a row as we filled people's grocery lists. So I knew how to count 8 plus 7 plus 6 plus 2 plus, so I was like, that's a lot of zeros more than I'm making.
Yeah.
And we're doing the same thing. So that was problematic because he had the Fugees and I had Mariah Carey.
Wow.
Right? And then right after Mariah Carey, I kind of got Destiny's Child. So I'm like,
yeah.
I think we're kind of doing the same thing. And because he was my friend, I said, okay, I confess, I kind of saw your pay, and I'm going to use that to go to the CFO. And I did. And I said, dude, this is a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem. It's a problem. And it still took him a couple of months, but then I got a couple of zeros that meant something.
It's significant.
Yeah, but I had to, if he didn't have to pee, sorry, I would never know that because nobody discussed that. But he was making significantly more than me, not $5,000, $50,000 more. It was $50,000 more than I was.
I will say I still think that is an issue,
Probably.
right? It's certainly an issue across industries. I see it too. I think the solve for it is for women to share our salary histories with each other. And I have a quick story as well, and I've written about it. When I did accept the offer at the show, I had just gotten a deal sheet, right? And it was more money than I had ever seen in my life. I'm from the Bronx Project, so I was like, I've made it. And I got a call from Sherry Shepherd I don't know how she got my cell phone number, but she calls me and she was like, I hear you're joining The View. And I said, yeah. She said, let me go over my salary history. She sure did. And she shared Jenny McCarthy's salary history and some others. And what I had on that deal sheet was a pittance, even though it looked really great. And so I, had that ammunition to then renegotiate that deal sheet. And I then, I had been at CNN for a long time, and I shared that information with the women that were at CNN. My salary history, and it's something that I do now. I practice that.
Yeah.
And if you can get a man to help you, it's even better, because they always get paid more than we do. And so I think that is the solve. I think the other thing that I used to see is women thinking that there was only space for one, right? And that's just not true. There's space for all of us. And I have seen a shift, I think. I hope all of you have seen that as well. Because again, together we're so much more powerful in the room, with more voices saying the same thing, and sharing our salary histories. So I hope that you all are seeing that as well.
For sure. I'll piggyback and say what I've learned is a consistent pattern is that we as women in business are making our reproductive decisions or not because of the work and the burnout and the competitiveness of these male-dominated industries. I remember, I have a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I remember being pregnant with our first son, who's now 10, when I worked on President Obama's campaign. And I was 1 month into the role, in this big national role in Chicago headquarters, finding out that we're expecting our first child. And with no pressure from anyone, I hid it and concealed my pregnancy until I couldn't anymore out of just fear. Would I lose my seat at the table? Will they still invite me on business trips? It took 5 years for me to decide to have another child when it's something that I wanted. And I remember, actually, I worked for Google at the time, and my former boss is in the room, Melanie Parker, because I remember how important it is not only be in an environment where you feel safe, where you feel like you are supported, but also to have people, for those of you who have managers and supervisors and people that you report to have good managers, because I felt like I was gonna be okay. And so when I think back to, we just did a big study with the Recording Academy and Grammys with Berkeley and Arizona State University, and there's actually data to back this up. We as women are not having children. We are not reproducing because of our careers. So imagine what that's doing to the generations to come in our families. And so for me, that's something that I've seen as a trend for the 2 decades that I've been around doing this.
Well, I think for me, it just goes to show why leadership matters and women in leadership positions matter. They did a review of Hillary's Senate staff salaries, and looking for the big aha moment of all the men in our office getting paid more than the women. And actually, it was something she was very intentional about, that if you had this job, X, and you were a man or woman, it didn't matter, you had the same salary. Having said that, in 1997, when I was first hired at the White House, I remember the very first job I was offered. I walked into Human Resources and they said, well, you're gonna have this title and your salary is $27,500. And I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, this is amazing. It was my first paycheck. I said yes, ran out the door, had a job that I loved, and I was thrilled. And it was only much later that when you work in government, all salaries are public, that I looked at what my male counterpart was making in President Clinton's office. He was then President of the United States, more than double what I was making. We had the exact same job. And so even in environments where you don't, necessarily, you have to be intentional and go. And I remember the very first time I actually asked for a salary increase, and it was after we left the White House, and I was shaking, going in to see my female supervisor. I'm worth more. You want me to do more work, you want me to have a bigger title, I'm worth more. And I remember almost tearing up and saying, this is how much more I wanted, and it was a pretty significant amount. And she said, you got it. And sometimes you just have to ask because you have to believe you're worth it and worthy, and more often than not, you are, and you'll be surprised by the reaction.
Absolutely. I was going to say, how do you navigate power structures earlier in your career? Right? Okay, give that a clap. How do you navigate power structures early on in your career? Like, what was, when you were making that decision to say, like, look, I'm worth so much more than this, what was going on in your mind to, like, decide this is the time?
Well, I think for me it was having a lot of mentors. It's one of the reasons I am a huge supporter of Forbes and particularly the mentoring program. It is you have to see something to know it's possible, but also having somebody to bounce ideas off of. I think of what the 46-year-old me knows now that I wish the 26-year-old me knew. And to have somebody to go and say, well, what do you think? Bounce off this idea. I mean, the point that Sunny was making, the fact that Sherry called her, I mean, I have definitely been in a space. I mean, for many years, I was the only, brown woman, certainly the only Muslim woman doing what she was doing. So I was navigating a very kind of singular space. But knowing that I had, first of all, a boss and a series of female mentors around me, and you can't just get mentors, you have to seek them. You have to go to Yvette and say, I want you to give me advice. I want you to sit down and tell me what you think I can do. And that, again, is all about intentional purpose. But that has taken a lot of experience to get to this place.
It took me a long time. I've always been very good at sticking up for other people and giving voice for other people. I'm a mama bear. Don't look at my kid any kind of way. Why did my kid get that grade? I mean, or that assignment, or that spot on the team. And I was like that, I think, when I worked for the Justice Department. I would take the crappiest assignments, I would work the longest. Oh, you want me to work this weekend? Sure. All sorts of things like that. And it took me years to be the person that I am today, to say, well, I don't like that. That's not good for me. Mm-hmm. No, I'm not gonna work this weekend. I'm gonna go to my kid's game. Yeah. It took me a very long time to do that. And if I would tell my 53-year-old self, gosh, why weren't you that person at 25? Because
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yvette, in 2010, you were very intentional, and you were like, look, I'm senior vice president of Sony, and it's time for me to start and branch out on my own, and you started Shure Media Group. Yeah. So what advice would you give to women who are looking to just step outside of it and say, look, I want my own thing for myself?
First of all, I love you for thinking I was intentional. I love that I faked you out. I'm going to be really honest with everybody in this room. When I left Sony, I had absolutely no plan. It took me 5 years to leave Sony. I started in 2005 in Spain, writing a Destiny's Child hiatus. They were going to announce it on stage. And when they did that, I was like, thank you, I can leave. And then it was like, oh no, but there'll be a solo record. And then, and they just signed someone else. And oh, there's this guy from Ohio named John Stevens that's gonna be John Legend, and he's coming, so I wanna be here to work. And it was, all of these opportunities were coming, and I stayed and stayed and stayed. And then when I left, it was because I felt that there was nowhere else to go. Like I had done it, what I needed to do, and I was ignoring certain personal things in my life that I needed to take care of. So that was my intention. Just go, my dad was ill, spend time with your dad, and then whatever comes will come. Literally, I had no business plan. Sorry, I know it sounds, I mean, I had no business plan. I didn't write one, but the phone rang. The phone rang, I was in the office, my little home office, and on the other side of the phone was a husky Houston drawl. Like, you left Sony, so you leaving me? I'm like, well, I'm under contract with Sony. No, well, I need you. That's all I needed to hear. Someone needed me. And that's the exact words she said, I need you to be my publicist. I don't know if my husband was hearing it, but like 3 days later, he had like some business plans and said, let's start our company, because you can do it with one client. You can do it with one client, and that's how I built. And having Beyonce as my first client in my company gave me a little bit of power to be choosy. Yeah, I was able to say yes, no. I was able to really say who I am through my work and only say yes to people who were intentional and purposeful about their art and giving back. And so I stayed poorer than I could have been for a little while, but I made better choices, and then a purple guy from Minneapolis came calling, and I said, I'm good to go. And we built from that. We built from that.
And there is no resume anymore. Yvette, okay? Absolutely, absolutely.
It's what we do now. It's what we do.
Absolutely. You know, women get told a lot of things through our professional careers. Don't let them see you cry, be tough, be strong. What were some of the lessons that you learned that either you didn't accept or you just left behind or you actually did take with you? Sunny, I'll go with you.
I heard all those things. Conform. You know, don't wear your hair curly. Don't show emotion on television. Sort of toe the line. And I did those things for a long time. For me, the moment changed when I was covering the Trayvon Martin trial. And also sort of almost hide your authenticity, especially as a reporter, right? And I felt in some respects that being a reporter of color wasn't necessarily a superpower. At least I was taught that you shouldn't use that lens to report. I now know that that is not true. That is my superpower. No one can report on a black kid being murdered in the street like I can because I'm a black mother. And so all those things that were taught to me were wrong. And it had to come to that sort of crisis moment in my life where I saw inequity and I saw a dearth of coverage, and I had to sort of viscerally reach out. And my career took off from that very moment because I was being authentic. And so I think sometimes we need those crisis moments to really break loose.
I would say for me, I'm naturally an introvert, which is funny with me sitting here, right, mic'd up. But it's true, I grew up painfully shy. I'm from a long line of strong black women that will, you know, do anything it takes to make sure that I'm safe. But because of that, I never had to like lean into my strength because I was surrounded by so many strong women. And I was told when I first started out my career, you need to be more vocal, work on your, you know, your professional posture and your executive presence, and speak up more and say more and be more assertive. And when I did that, for me, it wasn't authentic, right? I knew that I could literally feel myself out of my body in those moments, trying to be what they told me I had to be to thrive. And I think when I tapped into my vulnerability as a superpower, when I was willing to let my voice shake, as it still does, when I was willing to speak when I actually had something to offer instead of feeling pressured to just be in the conversation, I found that my quiet nature was actually the most powerful thing in every room. Yeah. Right? Like when everybody...
Same.
Right? And so you'll find, you know, that sometimes, my grandmother used to always say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Come on.
Right? Listen more than you speak. And it has truly been the most valuable tool in my success. I'm now able to speak when it counts, and the room stops, and I close every deal. Like, I literally my deal rate went from like 20% to 99 because now I'm living in my truth. And so that for me, the vulnerability is your superpower, and the authenticity that was said before, just be who you are, and the world will adjust.
Absolutely. Human.
Right.
Speaking of the wisdom of our elders, I think so much of it, you know, I tell this story very often that my father, who loved plants, and we had a very vibrant garden in our house, always said that people are like plants, and a plant is only as good as its roots. If you take care of those roots, if you nurture that soil, it doesn't matter wind, storm, rain, the plant's going to be okay. And so I think if we are lucky to have that kind of grounding, and frankly, that's why when people say to me, what do you think the most important job you've ever had is, and they list all the things I've done that I've been privileged to do in 26 years, I still say mother. My most important job is raising my 10-year-old son to be a good human being, to learn how to not just respect women, but also not fear their power. And so, but that is how I was raised, and so to come into the world professionally, I kind of had a lot of confidence. I was a little bit of a loudmouth when I was growing up, and that was always very encouraged. And so I didn't notice that that Hillary and I were the only women at a bilat, or I was the only woman of color in a certain room or space, or I was the only person praying or fasting during Ramadan. I had that confidence growing up. But one of the things we were talking about just before we came out to join all of you, because I think one of the singular lessons, there's several lessons I've learned in my life, but number one, the most precious thing we have is time and our health. Yes. If the things that we did pre-pandemic and post-pandemic and how it's affected us, seize the moment, seize the day, time goes by so quickly. So if you're not every day learning something, growing in some way, think about how to do that. Yvette, I'm in that space that you are in right now. What is the thing? I jumped off a cliff when I wrote my book. What is the thing that scares you the most? Consider doing it, because you might be really good at it. And to be in rooms with a lot of people, I mean, how often do we sit in a meeting and say, I'm sorry, but, well, why are we apologizing for speaking, or calling into our bosses and saying, I'm just checking in? Why the just? Yes. I'm checking in. And I try to be very intentional about how I now operate in the world. And again, at 46, I know a lot more than I knew than a 26-year-old. So I encourage all of you to do the thing that scares you the most.
Yes. Yvette.
I kept saying that I'm going to get through today without tears, but anybody who knows me knows that's impossible. Wow. I've spent so much time in this business, walking behind, walking by the side, protecting people, creating their careers, waking up every morning understanding that my people don't even know what I do. They don't understand it. Like, why? They kept asking. And I'm in the period of deep, deep, deep loss right now. Deep mourning, deep grief. And every single time I say yes to something, I'm so happy for exactly how they raised me, to be sensitive, to be an empath, to really understand people. All of the things that I was afraid of, crying all the time, being too sensitive, helped me in my career. Yeah. I had to feel for these young people who no one was willing to give a chance. No one was willing to say, don't sit like this when you do an interview, girl. Come on, sit up. Sit up. And no one was saying to them, when you walk into an interview, the interview has started. Everything you do, it's on record. So fix that. No one was saying, look at me. I want to see you have no lipstick on your teeth, because the cameras are right there. But it was all of those things. And I lost some people just in the last 6 weeks. And one of the things that make me get up, stand up and do is what I said earlier. They did not finish it. They didn't have a chance to sit on panels. They didn't have a chance to fly across the world and represent artists and people who write books and all of those things. For those of us who are here, for those of us who are able to carry on for them. Carry on for them. Absolutely. Wear all of your fine clothes. Wear all of your fine clothes. Pray in the middle of the day because that's what your religions say you should do. Be respectful and kind because it is not a weakness. And say good morning to people if they don't even answer you. Because you know what? You saw them. Maybe they'll think about it and see one other person and give that one person a chance. Let me say this last thing. When I travel back to my little island, it is my super time. I feel like I have an S on my chest when I get off that plane and I smell those spices because I'm gonna leave that island leaving a mark on one. I just need one. Yeah. Nice to hear and see a whole room of gorgeous people that hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully we learned from all your energy. But if we took the time, if one of us, each one of us, took the time to see one person, and sometimes it's one person who don't look like us. Those 4 girls from Destiny's Child didn't sound like me. They were eating gumbo. I never knew what gumbo was. It was a history lesson. I only knew one place in Texas. It was called Dallas. There was a show on TV. I'm old. Going to Houston, like, what is Houston? Take the time, learn something new. Most importantly, be yourself. All of it. All of it.
Well, with that, I'm going to use what you told us in the prep call. The company that you keep and the people that you allow in your space is so important. So thank you so much, ladies, for letting me be a part of yours. This has been amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. But in celebration, it's time to pop some bottles. So let's get the champagne going. And as we pass out the glasses, if you guys would please give a word of inspiration. Thank you so much. I'll start with Huma. A word of inspiration that you would give to the queens in this audience.
A word of inspiration. I will go back to my mantra, which is always consider doing things that scare you the most because it's probably worth it.
So on those days that each of the queens in here feel like you are queen in waiting, or not quite feeling queen-like, because we all have those days, protect your peace, fight for your heart, love on yourself, and just remember you are that queen.
That's right.
I think in one way or another, we were all saying, be your authentic self, be true to yourselves. And I think it's very important to find the space in your life to combine your passion with your purpose. I think that's key to a happy life, really.
Well, I said a lot already, but, but the one thing I will add to everything I said was, sisters, take the trip. Take the trip. Don't even wait if your girlfriend's not ready. Listen, I am happily married for 40 years.
Come on.
And let me tell you, my best vacation is by myself.
Hello.
By myself. I'm madly, deeply in love with this man from the time I was 17, but don't be afraid to be with the most important person. Be in love with you. It will give you all of the energy to be in love with everybody else. But first, take the trip.
Absolutely. And before we do our toast, our all-together toast, shout out to Armand Brignac for giving us this bubbly. Thank you so much. And without further ado, please let's everyone lift our glasses.
Stand up, ladies.
Yes.
Stand up. Stand up. Standing ovation for yourself.
Yes. Cheers. These are your queens of culture, everybody. Yes. Thank you so much, everybody. I know.
Proud of Sadé.
Ready? So who makes this?
This concludes our programming. We would like to thank you for your time and participation in today's events, as well as our partner, Moet Hennessy. Please join us for continued networking and cocktails. Enjoy the rest of your evening.